the tabs at the bottom of the gCADPlus user interface, down here, snap, grid, ortho, polar, etc., all have a purpose, and it's quite important to keep your eye on those when you're drafting. Here I'm looking at a drawing, and if I wanted to see the grid in this drawing, I just click on the grid option there. It turns red, and the red is an indicator that you've switched that on. It's referred to as a toggle. You toggle it on as it is now and off like so. So let's leave it on. You may be able to see that there is a series of dots appear over the drawing. There's a major point and a minor point. The spacing of the dots in the major grid is controlled by some drawing settings, which we won't go into at the moment. Let's just concentrate on how you operate with these tabs. So if I wanted to use that grid and draw to it, I could start the line command. I could turn the snap on by clicking on it. And as I draw, you may be able to see that the lines that I'm drawing latch onto the grid, and I'll right click and exit. Then I'll take snap off and grid off. So I've drawn a little shape using the line command. Each one of these lines should be the precise length of the grid settings. So if we have a look at this line here, its length is 1,000 units. I'm in the metric environment here, so that's 1 meter long or 1,000 millimeters in length. So can you see that the grid and the snap settings are crucially important? There is a tendency for beginners to leave those on, and that can catch you out. Strange things can happen in your drawing environment. For example, if you've got the snap on and the grid setting is inappropriate, you may not see the grid, but suddenly your cursor is just jumping all over the place. And one of the favourite tricks in a drafting office is, in fact, is to set a huge grid, turn the snap on, and when someone comes back to their workstation, they find they can't even get into the drawing at all. So being aware of the settings on these tabs down here is crucially important. You'll notice if you let the cursor hover over them, you can use function keys. Function key F7 will turn the grid off. So if I press F7 now, the grid goes and the tab returns to a black tab. F9 takes snap off. So now we're back to the normal situation. One more, right click and erase. So I don't think you necessarily have to work and experiment with things on the tab settings at this stage, but you do need to be aware of them. If I choose the line command again, I'll type L, the shortcut for line. You can see that I can draw lines at any angle. I'll right click and exit from there. If I click on the ortho switch and start the line command again, can you see I can only draw either horizontally or vertically? So the ortho switch is important. Let's turn it off. The polar switch is an interesting variation in a sense of the ortho one. Let's turn it on, and I can draw a line. I can go horizontally, but I can also go up at 45 degrees and then vertically and then back here at 135 degrees. So that's a tool that is really, really useful. If I right click on any of those buttons there, you can see what happens. It pops up the various toolbars. So that is potentially slightly confusing. Let's go back and turn that one off. So polar and polar tracking is really, really important. The OSNAP setting enables you to, if I start a line, say from here, I can draw to the midpoint of that line by coming over to this toolbar over here, going into the settings here, turning on midpoint, turning on object snap, and saying OK. You may now notice that the OSNAP button's gone red, and now if I say line, from here I can find the midpoint of that line, the midpoint of that one, and so on. We'll have a lot more to say about OSNAP settings in a little while. but if I click there, the OSNAP settings have now gone off. Line weight turns on display of line weight. If we zoom in on this bench here, you can see line thicknesses are being displayed when I toggle that line weight setting up. The entity setting enables you to display if any of these things like paving bricks here or the fountain, if they've got any additional information assigned with them, and they haven't done that now, that would toggle the display of extra information. Regen is a tool that refreshes the whole screen if there's a lot of overlapping lines and so on. That sometimes happens when you do a cut and a paste from another drawing. You need to run the regen tool. So I hope you can see that the status line is really quite important, and in a sense I'm sorry to introduce it to you early on in your learning, but it can catch you out if you're not aware of the status of those switches.
Earlier in this discussion, I talked about one of the switches on this status line was that extended data. gCADPlus is somewhat unusual among landscape CAD drafting packages in that it enables you to store extra non-graphic information, and if that switch is on, and as I move over the design, I have to click, make sure the cursor is active. Can you see here, as I just hover over a symbol, this tells me that this is Choisya ternata, one particular variety of it, and it gives us the botanical name, common name, and a description. The same applies to this Japanese maple. That's a feature tree here, and so all sorts of information, extra information can be stored. If I move over here, that's a piece of custom unusual curved seating, is to be built by a particular craftsman. So extended information can be useful,